Hello, I'm delighted to welcome you to this LinkedIn Live. Today my guest is Susanne Madsen, and she's just written a book, How to Do the Inner Work, a guide to self-discovery, empowerment and emotional healing. So Susanne, it's lovely to have you with us. You may not know Susanne, you may well know Susanne actually if you're in my network, because many people will know about her as the award-winning author of The Power of Project Leadership and as an internationally recognised leadership coach. She's known for transformational leadership programs and has coached hundreds of individuals from high-profile organisations across the globe. And you're also other things, Susanne, so a keynote speaker on leadership, emotional intelligence, stress and team motivation, and you've worked with lots of organisations, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Lego, Philips, BAM and NXP, to name just a few. And your third book is now available in paperback, ebook and audiobook, described as brimming with insight, inspiration and powerful tools that free us from a lifetime of conditioning. So there we are, Susanne. How's that?
It's great, and you know what? I'm so proud of the audiobook because my previous books are not an audiobook, and I stood there and I recorded the whole thing in a studio. So that was an achievement.
I've never done that. I've 5 books written, and none of them. Actually, no. I tell a lie. Somebody else did an audiobook of my first virtual leadership, and it was so obvious. Oh, I probably shouldn't say this, should I? It's probably yeah. I think the person doing the book obviously wasn't as au fait with virtual leadership as I would have been had I been doing the book. But you've done your own, which is great.
Yes, I was sent these voices of some American men, and I thought, I can't imagine an American man from the Midwest reading my book.
And, yes, especially the personal stories. It's quite interesting. Anyway, so tell me a little bit about your new book and what made you write it. And I'll just remove the picture so we can see both of us.
Yeah. So my previous book, which is now in 2nd edition, The Power of Project Leadership, is really focused only for project managers becoming leaders, and it's a big professional book. And I just felt it was time to write something that was broader in scope, because a lot of the people I coach, and I mainly coach project managers, and I mainly run leadership programs for project managers, but actually the topics they come with, they are not unique to project managers. They are topics that we perhaps all struggle with at times. Why don't I feel confident in this situation? Or why do I feel overwhelmed? And there's so much change in the world. What do I do with it? And why can't I set boundaries and say no? Or all these topics that require a lot of introspection. And we all feel emotional at times. We all get triggered or angry or sad or afraid at times. And so how do we deal with that? Sometimes in a professional context, we like to put a lid on it, but then it bubbles up in other ways and we become, that angry email still gets written, or we walk home and we cry because it's overwhelming. I don't know what we do, but it's best if we can process it and be conscious of it.
Sounds good. Okay, so Susanne, and this is a question that there may, a lot of people we work with, project professionals, are really down to earth. They're focusing on making things happen. After all, turning dreams into reality. And some of what you're talking about in this book could feel a bit woo-woo. Has anyone ever accused you of that, I wonder? I wonder what you say to them.
Yeah, so for me, woo-woo is like angels and stuff. It's not, emotions to me are not woo-woo, but I get your question. And most of the people I run leadership programs for are actually engineers.
I'm an engineer.
Yay!
Amongst other things. Yeah.
And you're right. Project managers are down to earth, and our job is to get things done. So I get it. And what I would say is, because most people can probably follow me on this one, which is that if we want to become good project leaders, we need a healthy amount of emotional intelligence. Yeah, we could argue how much it is. If we are very junior, I think the skills and the tools do matter. The more senior we become, as we begin to lead teams, have more impact, it is the emotional intelligence piece. But what's the first step of emotional intelligence? It is actually self-awareness and becoming aware of what's happening for us. I think, and I have been in this camp, yeah, emotional intelligence, tick in the box, I know what it is. I know what it is conceptually, but to live it and to breathe it is quite different. And I always say to people, the most important person you will ever get to lead is yourself. So that's what I would answer to people who think that looking at my thoughts and emotions is too much. Well, that is the first step to actually being able to lead effectively.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I'm sure that anyone who is thinking, oh, this isn't for me, is now thinking, actually, yes, that makes sense. So, Susanne, what does it actually mean to do the inner work? That's what your book's called, after all. In fact, let's just pop up the title. What does it mean to do this inner work? And can you give us some examples, particularly focusing on things that might be useful for people working in leadership, collaboration and change?
Yeah, I think examples are good because it can be a bit like thoughts and emotions. What does it really mean? So the way I would summarize what inner work means, it actually means to be curious about what's below the bonnet. And let's look at some examples. So for instance, we can probably all recognize that there are certain situations where we feel a bit insecure, we don't feel confident, maybe we lack confidence. Not all the time, but in certain situations. And I think in a project context, what might those situations be? Well, I need to present, I need to meet a new stakeholder, I need to do a team kickoff, or maybe even worse, a workshop where we talk about what we expect from each other, or requirements gathering. I don't know. There could be many situations where I feel uncertain or lack confidence. And in those situations, I think the inner work will really help us. In fact, it's the only thing that will help us. Somebody telling you something externally is not going to make you more confident. So in this situation, we could look at, well, what am I telling myself? Am I telling myself that I don't know how to do this? That's going to exacerbate my feeling of lack of confidence. Am I telling myself that, if this goes wrong, I'm going to get fired? It sounds drastic, but actually there were some thoughts that I used to tell myself when I was leading projects. I used to catastrophize. Well, it's because you look at me, but the two project managers before me on this program had been fired. So I actually had this unarticulated fear.
I think I had a project where I was the third project manager as well. And yes, I can relate to that.
Unfortunately. So looking at what am I saying to myself? Am I exacerbating it? Am I catastrophizing? Because we have a tendency to catastrophize. And actually, what am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling anxious. Okay, where does that anxiety sit in my body? Well, let's say I feel butterflies. But instead of putting a lid on these butterflies, can I allow myself to feel them? Yeah, but then it's going to get worse. Actually, it is not. It's counterintuitive, but if I can say, okay, I can feel my butterflies. I feel tension right now. I feel anxious. Can I just let them be there? Actually, the feeling will be processed and it will diminish. It's really quite extraordinary. And then we can also work with situations where I have felt confident. So can I have another image in my mind? Can I recall a situation where I felt confident in my body? So these are all inner tools that are in the inner world that can help me feel more confident. And I might give you another example too. And that's an example where, let's say, I'm overworked, I'm stressed, I have too much work. Who doesn't recognize that? It's hard to set boundaries because, again, if I say no to yet another project, or if I go home now, whereas I still have more work to do, how's that going to reflect on me? Is that going to show that I'm not capable? Are they going to choose somebody else for the next project? So again, I have a fear that comes up in me, which makes me maybe not set boundaries, not say no, not delegate. But it's creating overwhelm for me. So doing the inner work in this case is really about understanding what are the patterns that are causing me to overwork myself? What is the fear in me? What is that thought in me saying? And am I trying to compensate for not feeling good enough or strong enough or clever enough by overworking. So, and that could go quite deep with asking questions like that.
Wow, some, yeah, really, really different but very pertinent examples to project professionals. Right. You mentioned in the book that happiness is an inside job. Can you give some examples of how a person can be more rooted in themselves, especially if they're working in the busy world of making change happen in organizations, which I suspect most people listening to this will be?
And again, let's start with what is reality. Reality is that there's so much that changes, right? What is it that makes us feel unsafe? Well, it could be trying to make change happen, but it's not going fast enough. I have deadlines. My stakeholders I don't feel they're working with me because they have their own priorities. Scope changes happen. I don't like the word resources, but some of my project staff gets reallocated or they leave the project. So I'm left with this feeling of dread and anxiety, and my deadline is not moving. So there's a million reasons why on a normal day on a project there's change, and it's easy for me to put the blame on the external world. So if only I had a better team or a bigger team, it would be okay. If only my client didn't change their mind in the last minute, it would be okay, etc., etc. Okay, that might be partially true, but I can't influence that. Maybe I can influence it a little bit, but I fundamentally can't change it. So what do? I'm doomed. Right?
Doomed is not a very helpful thought, is it?
Exactly. So I'm obviously being provocative because that's how some of us feel. I don't know what to do. I feel that I have no choice. But actually, that's where we need to. The only thing we can do is go inwards and ground ourselves in the midst of all this change, because our external world is not going to change. And what can we do? Well, we can use our breath. That's one thing we can do. And can be very simple. People might dismiss it. Oh yeah, I've heard of the breath. That's okay. Can you give me something else? But actually, the breath is one of the only tools we have available that can speak directly, that we can take control of, that can regulate our parasympathetic nervous system. And I just want to remind people listening that we have these different parts of our brain, and where we want to be as project professionals most of the time, if not all of the time, is in our frontal lobe. We want to be in our rational brain. That means there's no fear. We are open. We are curious. We are collaborative. And
we've got the high executive functions all working beautifully. Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad how you came alive there, and because that's where we want to be, right? We want to think expansively and think creatively. But when things happen that trigger us, too much change, too much stuff, we go into our emotional brain. And that's when we narrow our focus. So being emotional and being triggered and being afraid of all this change is not wrong. But we need to recognize it so that we can quickly come back online. And that's where the breath is one of the quickest ways to do that. It's one of the quickest ways to signal to our body, actually, there is no tiger right now. This is unpleasant. There's something I need to deal with. But me panicking about it is making matters worse. So the breath is one thing. And again, back to the thoughts. What am I saying to myself? Am I exacerbating? We all know that I can have this thought about it's their fault. They didn't do what they said they were going to do. I was relying, we had a deadline. I asked them on Monday. They said they had everything under control. Now it's Thursday. It's deadline day. And it's not being delivered. And I feel things, my stress levels go up. Exactly. You're wearing red today, Penny. So in that moment, my anger might be justified, but it's not helping me if I'm going to speak to this team member. So using the breath, understanding what I'm saying to myself, am I exacerbating it? Oh, they promised, it's their fault. How can they let me down? That's just exacerbating my anger. So I may need to have a proper conversation with them, but it's not very helpful if I have that conversation whilst I'm in effect, whilst I am possessed by this emotion. So that's a big part of the inner work, is actually recognizing our emotion, being able to be with it, understand where it comes from, looking at my thoughts about it, using the breath to calm myself down. So I would say that they are ways in which I can be more rooted in myself. And then I think we all have certain things that can ground us. We're all different. Some people, they have an image of their family on their desk that grounds them in that moment. They have a scent. Some people love scents, right? So they have a certain scent they can smell. I don't think cuddly toys is what we have at work, but some people like a texture or something they can hold in their hand. So there's many ways in which we can ground ourselves. We can remind ourselves of our strengths and what we really bring, and how much experience we have. That can all help us to not get consumed by stress. Yeah.
Wow. Right. So moving on, in the book you talk about lots of different.
But Penny, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, am I moving on too fast? I'll shut up.
Because I'm so curious. Do you have anything that you do? What comes up for you in all of this? What works for you when there's all too much change?
Oh, you're turning the tables on me. Yeah, absolutely. So I think just realizing that you can always, whatever happens, you can always stop. You can always have a break. Even if you're facilitating a workshop, people love breaks. So if it all gets too much, you can just say, let's just have a 5-minute break. And just stop and, as you say, breathe and sort of get to a place that's more peaceful, and then you're more likely to be thinking thoughts that are helpful, as opposed to it's all going horribly wrong and I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know how this process is going to work or whatever.
And you know what, I hear the birds in your background, and something as simple as taking a short break, it could be 2 minutes, just listening to the bird or noticing the tree outside your window. I mean, we're back to some mindfulness, but actually it can sometimes be enough to reset us and not catastrophize.
The other thing that's really helpful is remembering that a break between something happening and your reaction is good. I'm just going to stop. I've got a tickle. Right, should we move on then to the
Okay, go on.
topics? You talked about some different topics that can be really powerful. Could we just focus on one though? Perhaps you could lead me through something that other people could join in on, anyone who's watching. How about that?
Yeah. So I think for this to be effective, maybe people watching either live or the recording can think of a situation that is unsettling in some way, something that is not necessarily open and expansive and creative, but maybe a bit contracted and a bit stressful or a bit angry, whatever it is. And we can try to use the breath and see how that works, how the breath can center you and anchor you right now. And there are many, many different breathwork techniques, but the one I would encourage everyone to try out right now is actually a breathwork technique I refer to in the book as coherent breathing. Excuse me, and it's very powerful because it has the ability to synchronize and harmonize the heart with the brain. And I would ask people to deepen their inhales and deepen their exhales and make them equal length. So we basically breathe out. They can follow my hand if they want, but we can breathe in to the count of 5. Oh, they can't see my hand. And
you have to bring your hand to, yeah, that's it.
To the count of 5. And in to the count of 5. So really a slow circular breath in and out. And see if you can imagine breathing in and out through the heart. So imagine that the breath is coming in through your chest, in and out through your chest. Slow, deep breaths. And as we do this, if you can bring to mind an emotion of warmth or compassion. So you breathe in and you breathe out slowly and deeply, and you focus on an emotion of warm-heartedness or compassion or something that gratefulness, something that makes you feel warm in the middle of your chest as you continue to slowly breathe in and slowly breathe out.
I'm just wondering if I can say anything. I've been following along with you. Yes, I'm feeling very, very relaxed. Yep. And also noticing that my I think my belt is on a bit too tight. Just sitting here, I hadn't been aware of that all day. Yeah.
So your facial expression, Penny, when I said notice, breathe, try to breathe in through your heart, which obviously we don't do, but we imagine it. You went, oh. So what?
I was just being a typical engineer and thinking, you can't breathe in through your heart. There's no orifice to the outside. Yeah. And then I just let that go away, and yeah.
And the reason why we say that is because we're so head focused. We use our head. We come up with solutions.
Yeah.
That's what we power through with, and we forget that the heart is also powerful. And the heart is a real organ, and when we combine the heart with the head, we actually get a more expansive state. And just out of fun, I mean, I could ask people who are listening to imagine the flow state, a state where everything is gelling, we're working well with the team, we are creative. Does that just come from the head, or do we also think that the heart is engaged?
I think the heart probably is engaged, isn't it? It's Csikszentmihalyi, isn't it? Flow. Yep.
Yeah.
Ooh, right. So relaxed, I've forgotten the thread of where we were. Yes, really helpful. Yeah. So in what ways can this breath work that you've described help someone who feels stressed and overwhelmed?
So I think we touched upon it previously, perhaps, when we can either be actually in a non-stress state, or we can be in a stress state. When we're in a stress state, we either fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn response means that I'm trying to please everybody. I'm trying to make the conflict go away by just, okay, tell me what you need and tell me what you want. They're typically people who take on too much. So no matter what our stress response is, the breath can help us to shift out of that and come back to our frontal lobe. So it's shifting out of our emotional brain, which is our middle part of our brain, our limbic system, and coming back to our frontal lobe. And it's very simply telling our body that it's safe. Because if we get stressed or tense, we tense up, our breathing shifts, we breathe faster, we breathe from our chest. So if at will, we can slow down our breath, deepen it, make the inhales equal length to our exhales, or perhaps even make our exhales longer than our inhales, we are signaling to our body that it's safe. You don't have to be in fight mode or flight mode. So that's what it does. It's magical.
Absolutely, and I think this is something I've used a little, not quite as extensively as you with your 28 or whatever it is, different exercises. But yes, some of them have been very useful. It's really interesting.
Sorry.
Can I just jump in and say we've got 5 people live with us at the moment, but very strangely nobody's commented, and I wonder perhaps this is because this is quite a potentially vulnerable thing to comment and ask questions on something that's so emotionally involved, I suppose. But yes, do carry on, Susanne.
Because on this specific technique, I last week I connected with another project manager. She's based in the US, but she's actually from Europe, and she uses many of the techniques that I do. And she's also running projects, and she uses this technique with her team. So, and she uses it with herself, and she says people are actually okay at the beginning of the meeting. They might do this because she says not only does it create coherence between your heart and your brain, it also can start to create coherence in the whole group. And her testimonial was because she started using this every day, several times a day when she takes a bathroom break. She's able to run the same kinds of projects, but with a lot less stress. So it increases her resilience. And I think that's a testimony to a simple technique like this, which doesn't take many minutes.
Super. And yeah, I can imagine, absolutely powerful. Projects can be so stressful, especially if the project manager is a stressy type of person. They can be so different from the sort of creative, innovative spaces that projects can be when they're led really well. And I'm sure this would make a difference. So this has been a little bit different from the normal focus on techniques for change, Susanne. We've been looking at ourselves. Is there anything you'd like to add about how people who are leading change can lead themselves as well?
Well, as you said, there are 24 exercises in the book, and not every exercise is relevant for every project, for every person. Some people need to use the breath work, or they need to be able to not be less reactive, perhaps, so journey with their emotions. Some people are very unhappy in their jobs, and they can perhaps understand what they need more of in their work and life, what they need less of. But I think the one thing I want to say to people, don't be afraid of your emotions. As much as we don't want to be lost in being overly emotional, the real work is to process our emotions so that we don't have to let them loose on the project team. If I can just acknowledge my own anger or my own sadness, whatever the emotion is, then I don't need to take it out on others. Then I can express it in a constructive way. And that's actually what this is about. We all want to come across authentic and constructive. So we do need to express our disappointments, but we need to express it in a way that is constructive and where we get heard. If we just flabbergasting, it doesn't come across in the right way. People stop listening to us. So yeah, I think the book is in service of people. It's meant as a gift for people who will help them deal with challenging situations, challenging emotions, challenging thoughts.
Wonderful. So I have a question for you. How can people get hold of a copy of this book? And do you have a discount code or anything like that for them?
Well, the book is, I don't have a discount code at the moment. The book is available on Amazon, which I think a lot of people use Amazon. But the audiobook, and I didn't realize this, if people have, and this speaks to the discount code, I think, if people have a subscription with Audible, you get 1 credit every month. If people have a subscription with Spotify, a friend, yes, this is free, then it's free. So many of the streaming, it's even on iTunes. So all the streaming services have it, which surprised me. I wasn't aware of that. And it's on Waterstones. It's everywhere, really.
Wow.
But it's also not, the book is not as expensive as this book now sells for £30. And the other book
that's
is
actually quite reasonable for a professional project book. Mine's just been put up to more than that, which I was astonished at. One of them,
right?
Yeah.
It might be, I don't know, but it's at least £30. But this is half that price, and it's not as thick either, so it's much more accessible, I would say.
Yes, it's definitely accessible. Whoa, well, we haven't had any questions come in. We were prepared for lots of questions, but I think maybe, having questions publicly visible on LinkedIn on something that is maybe quite private is where people are. So I'm sure if people do want to find out more and they'd like to ask questions individually, they could connect with you on LinkedIn, Susanne?
Yeah, absolutely.
and ask you one-to-one. That might be a good way to go. Okay, so I think I'll just check. Yep, I think we're now at the end. So thank you very much for coming on and for letting me grill you about your book, for giving me an advance copy so I could read through and check that actually it made sense and that I thought it would be useful to those who follow me as well. Thank you very much, Susanne.
Thank you, Penya. Thank you for allowing me to turn the tables just once.
Yes, I wasn't expecting that, but thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Bye.